Um, so a few things to discuss. We have some Shabbos questions and some some interesting business monetary questions. Um, so when it comes to Shabbos, there's a few different shilos that we'll have with the snow. The first, most basic question that we would wonder about is snow muktzah? Is snow muktzah? What do you think? Right, we know Chazal established that.
I would think probably making snowballs probably.
So let me just explain what I mean by muktzah. Okay. So muktzah is a particular rabbinic prohibition within Hilchos Shabbos, which means that there are certain things that we're not allowed to move. Things which are not prepared for Shabbos use, halachically prepared for Shabbos use, we cannot move. So when we talk about muktzah, we're talking about that specific prohibition of moving items which are not prepared for Shabbos use. Nothing to do with malachas. That we'll have to leave for a separate question afterwards. If there's any malachas, if there's any of the forbidden labors that are involved. But before anything, is snow muktzah on Shabbos? Is it included in that which Chazal established that we are not allowed to move things which don't have we'll call it a Shabbos use, a use for Shabbos. So really, we could start with a more basic question, which is rain muktzah? That's the more common question. Is rain muktzah? Obviously, water is not muktzah. The water that you have, that you get either from your water bottle or from your sink or any water that you have access to, typically on Shabbos, is water that's considered already prepared. It's already here. It's already in the world. It's already prepared for use. Rain, on the other hand, would seem to possibly fall into one of the most basic forms of muktzah, which is called nolad. Nolad means something was new, a newly created entity. So how would we look at rain? Would we look at rain as a new entity, or is rain just, it's just the process? It was already there. It was in the cloud, and then it just came down, but it's not really creating a new item. So there's a discussion in the Gemara about it. It's not entirely clear from the Gemara, but basically what comes out from the poskim, it seems to be pretty clear cut, is that rain is not muktzah. Meaning that we look at the rain as really having been around in the world already. It was in the cloud technically, but we don't look at it as like a newly created entity on Shabbos. If someone fashioned a new item and made a new kli, a new utensil, made something new on Shabbos, that would be nolad. But a new chicken egg the Gemara talks about that was laid, that would be an example of nolad, something which really didn't exist in the world before. It was created on Shabbos. We don't look at rain as something that was created on Shabbos, and therefore rain is not considered muktzah on Shabbos. The question is, what about snow?
Back to rain though.
Yeah.
So you're on a camping trip and you need to do on the Netilat Yadayim, and it's really raining hard, so you got your bucket outside. There's the utility to it.
Exactly, and
that's fine.
According to this, it would be totally fine, right?
Yeah.
That would be totally fine. Take it, drink it, use it for Netilat Yadayim. You would need to get it into a kli first, because just even if your hands would get very wet, for Netilat Yadayim, it would need to come from a kli. But yes, absolutely. The question is, what about snow? So many poskim say, which seemingly it would follow, is that snow is the same thing as rain. It froze. Right? Essentially, it's the same process, just it's colder outside, so you get snow instead of rain. So rain was more common, was talked about in the Gemara. Snow is less common, wasn't talked about. But many poskim say you could deduce from the fact that rain is not muktzah, that snow is not muktzah, and they consider snow something that is also that is not Muktzah. It is not Muktzah. It is like rain. Rav Moshe Feinstein has a short little question and answer in Chiluk Hey of his Teshuvos. And in there he says that snow is Muktzah. He says snow is Muktzah. You're not allowed to be metaltal on Shabbos. He does not explain much. Now, in those line of
what about the
Teshuvos.
snow on your shoes? If you walk out.
So we'll get to that. We'll get to that hopefully. But Rav Moshe seems to say. Now the question is, so it sounded like from the tshuva. Now just a little background. Those tshuvas were a little bit different in terms of format. I don't know exactly how the publishing went for them, but they're different. They're shorter. It was not a full tshuva where he really explained himself. It was just a couple lines, and he says that it's not the same as rain, and that was it. He didn't explain it. Other Talmidim have different versions of different things that were said. Did he say that snow is looked at real? It looks like a new entity, so therefore, even though scientifically it's not, but it looks like a newer thing as opposed to rain, or whatever other svara there would be. But bottom line is that Rav Moshe, apparently everyone seems to feel Talmidim, and that's what it sounds like from that tshuva, that at the end of the day he held that snow was Muktzah. At the same time, there's a lot of room to. Well, let's just deal with Chaim's question for a second. Even if let's say you would assume that snow was Muktzah, so let's just clarify that would not inhibit a person from walking in the snow, just like a person is able to walk in the dirt, even though dirt is for sure Muktzah. Dirt is Muktzah. It has no particular use on Shabbos. It's Muktzah Machmas Gufo. It's a classic form of Muktzah Machmas Gufo. Rocks are Muktzah. They are a classic form of Muktzah Machmas Gufo, meaning Muktzah Machmas Gufo is the most basic category of Muktzah. It means that it has no Shabbos use. It was not prepared for Shabbos, has no Shabbos use. But nevertheless, you could walk on it. So the really Muktzah is talking about handling things with your hands. When we talk about the Isra of tiltal, the Isra of moving items which are Muktzah, we're talking about taking items and handling them with your hands. Tiltal b'gufo, moving with other parts of your body, moving things with other parts of your body, is not included in Muktzah. There's a discussion how far that goes. This is really a tangent, but the Mishnah Berurah, and this is definitely the prevalent practice in America, maybe even most of Eretz Yisrael, is that Mishnah Berurah rules that there is no problem with Muktzah at all when it comes to begufo, moving things with your feet, moving things with your elbow. Again, this is not to be confused with forbidden labors. Doing them. This is not to be confused with shinoi, right? Shinoi is referring to the malachos, like let's say doing one of the forbidden acts on Shabbos, doing them in a shinoi would be doing them in an abnormal manner. This is different. This is that the sages only asered, they only prohibited Muktzah by using it by moving things with their hands. Mishnah Berurah rules that there is no problem with Muktzah at all, even intentionally, to move Muktzah, let's say, with one's feet. There is no Isser of Muktzah according to Mishnah Berurah. There is no problem at all. Other parts of the body, and the Chazon Ish has a different opinion. Without going into it, it's more makbar. But even according to the Chazon Ish, anything which is regular walking, yeah.
Yeah. So I heard if, like, let's say you're in the woods. You're hiking and you relieve yourself and you don't have any water. Last ditch is you can actually rub your hands on the dirt. Is that
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so
rub it on something, yes.
On something. So, okay.
Would you be able to do that on Shabbos, you're asking?
Yeah, Shabbos.
So first of all, just on a side note, you'd have a question about whether you could, how one should urinate on Shabbos in a place in terms of growing, in terms of contributing liquid to growth. But assuming that issue was avoided, So as long as you're not moving something, it's mutter. There's no isra of muktzah in touching,
Yeah.
right? There's no problem of touching. You can
But
touch.
if you use snow instead of dirt, then you very likely move the snow.
So if you exactly, very good. So that's like this famous Mag Mishnah who says that when it comes to something like an egg, he's talking about an egg which was muktzah because it was only hatched on Shabbos. So he says if you touch it, it's gonna move, right? So yeah, technically anything that you touch without moving it is not a problem of muktzah, right? You could put your hand on your car, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
You're not moving it, or any other item that doesn't move. So you would be able to use anything like that. You'd be able to use. There's a whole big discussion about growth. Like let's say you could use the grass. You accomplish the same. This halacha that you're talking about, midi de menaki. You'd be able to use other things like that. There's a whole discussion about whether those things are muktzah. That's getting a little bit off topic, but yes, you'd be able to do it on anything. You'd be able to rub it on anything where you're not considered moving it. So that would be according to Moshe Feinstein's opinion. Like I mentioned, really a great majority of the poskim said that this is not a problem with muktzah. That the water, the snow is not considered muktzah. They even found I mean now it's not so new. It came out in the 80s, but the Chavis Yar, who lived almost 400 years ago, his chuvas are considered a very very carry a lot of weight. He has another sefer on Shulchan Aruch that was only really published in the 80s. And in there he already talks about snow. We'll talk about more about what he says, but he says that also that it would not be an issue of muktzah. So muktzah would not be a problem according to many poskim. I imagine that definitely those that are connected to the Feinsteins probably treat it as muktzah, but many are makel that it's not considered muktzah. Another question that would come up is, what about shoveling? Now, if it snowed before Shabbos, then ideally all shoveling should be done before Shabbos, just like every other type of work that we do. We don't leave the work for Shabbos. The work should be done.
Does it also matter if there's an Erev in terms of shoveling?
Yes, so there would be no room to shovel if there's no Erev. All of this has to and you wouldn't be able to carry any snow or anything like that either.
So if it gets on your shoes, you got a problem.
That's a very good point. The whole discussion only starts when we're talking about that an Erev, anything that has to do with carrying outside.
So may
Now,
have
if you have snow on your shoes, so it's not really going to be a problem. You could shake it off, and that's all considered.
Kick it against outside wall.
Yeah, that's all 100% fine. That's all just nothing is handling the snow with your hands. Even according to Rav Moshe, as long as you're not handling with your hands, that would not be a problem.
So in other words, I guess no snowmen.
Oh, so we're gonna try to get to snowmen soon.
Snow people.
Snow
What
people.
about Ram would
This world's so
shake off his shoes dafka outside and not inside, because then it would be like you're assisting in melting it.
Interesting.
Is that a thing?
We'll get to that, the idea of risuk. That would seem to be a pretty be an interesting chumrah within risuk, because seemingly there's no kavanah for melting at all over there. But we'll try to get to risuk soon. The question.
Up on time, if you let your kids play outside, there's very likely going to form something if they're playing in the snow.
So right. So if they're below the age of any chinuch, so that's they do their own thing, right? The question is, what should depend on this is, should we let our older children that are already of the age of chinuch or older, should they, what would depend on this is, can they go and play in the snow? So according to Rav Moshe, you have a muktzah problem. Now you would be able to solve the muktzah problem, even according to Rav Moshe, by preparing the snow from before Shabbos. You can take an item which is unprepared, like sand, And if you make a sandbox, then you could have all of that. Typically, if you just have sand on the beach, sand is muktzah. If you make a sandbox and you have sand which is prepared, it's prepared from before Shabbos, then that would be mutter. So, according to Rav Moshe, you can make a snowbox and get rid of get rid of the muktzah problem. But like I said, many are lenient about the muktzah issue.
In places where they get like really high snow that it like goes up on the door, and you open up the door and there's just like snow, so they just stick
Like the blizzard in '78.
stick like a can of soda in there and use it as a fridge or something.
Right.
So that would be considered setting it aside, I guess, if you specifically.
I'm not sure if that would be enough. I'm not sure how practically you would do it to set aside snow if you wanted to like set aside for your whole backyard. I was thinking about what would be the practical way to do that. I'm not sure exactly how you do it, but you'd have to figure out how to set it aside and make it clear that it's set aside, and you'd be able to get rid of that problem. Now, when it comes to shoveling, so again, ideally, if there's snow before Shabbos, it should be shoveled before Shabbos. Sometimes you have a blizzard on Leil Shabbos, Friday night, or as Shabbos is coming in. And the question is now, people need to walk, and can you shovel on Shabbos? So one question is, right, if it's Muktzah, so then you're moving it, you're moving that which is Muktzah. If it's not Muktzah, so you avoid that issue. Even if it is Muktzah, there's something called tiltul min hatzad l'tzorich davar hamutter. When you're moving something in a indirect fashion for the purpose for something which is mutter. This is already, I think, going into a tangent, so I don't want to talk too much about this. But let's say you would avoid the muktzah issue. Basically, there wouldn't really be seemingly a very clear-cut isser in it's work. It's work that should be avoided when possible. But if there would be nothing else to do, then there's definitely room to shovel out a path. And there are many poskim that.
Someone had to go to the hospital.
Right.
Like a woman to have a baby.
Or have a baby.
And you wanted it to be prepared. You wanted in case they needed to go.
It with the shovel upside down.
So you don't need a shovel with the shovel upside down. You'd be you're anyway handling it in that way, even in the regular way. You're not handling it with your hands.
Yeah.
There's a discussion about whether something like a shovel would be tilted when it's out. This is all off topic, but basically, it's something that ideally should try to be avoided. If a person's able to have a worker do it, then that's definitely even better. But in times of need, there are many poskim that are meko about, in order preventing a sakana. For sure, when you have people walking to a shul or walking to a public place, that there would be room to.
Wait, so what was the tzad that it's a problem?
So that's right. So one thing would be to deal with his muktzah. It's like I said, it's very very possibly not muktzah. Even if it would be, there's another reason to be lenient, because you're not handling it directly with your hands.
Oh, okay. So it's
there are those that raise the question of making holes, flattening out a ground. Right, in time of the Gemara, it talks about the isser of bona by flattening out a dirt ground. There are those that raise that issue.
What if it's very powdery and you can sweep it away? Is that any better?
So that would seemingly still be similar to dirt, but practically many poskim are meko about that. It's not really considered ashuri gumas. We don't make that gzera. In outdoors. And that would be with shoveling. Now, if you had your regular person that comes, let's say a non-Jew, who comes and, plows, with machinery. So that would be more of an issue because then he's doing real malacha on your behalf. If there's not a need for it, there wouldn't be grounds for leniency over there, because he's doing, right. It's a non-Jew. It's real nakri, a non-Jew doing real malacha for you on Shabbos. But there are certain situations in a public setting where it's dangerous, and there are more leniencies, like you mentioned the other day, more leniencies regarding Amir Nakri when it comes to a public setting, and definitely anything which is dangerous. There's a lot more leniency when it comes to Amir Nakri. Making snowballs gets into a whole nother issue, and making snowmen, which is it considered bona, right? The act of building, an act of forming something on Shabbos, which is one of the malachas. It's not very permanent, so it probably would be derabanan. But is there an isur midarabanan of making a snowball or making a snowman by building a certain structure? So this is a matter of big dispute. Many said what?
An igloo or a fort.
Right. So an igloo you could hear is actually a more substantial building. When it comes to a snowball, many made the argument that a snowball has no lifespan to it. Like, it's just a little thing, and it's gone immediately. It has no kiyum to it. It doesn't really stay at all. And many made the argument that making snowballs is not included in the prohibition of bona, even midarabanan, and held that it was completely permissible. But the Chavos Yair, which we mentioned earlier, which is amazing, it's close to 400 years ago. He has a piece in there about, in the Makor Chaim, in his Sefer and Shulchan Aruch, about making snowballs on Shabbos. You see, this was an ancient game, and he says this is a problem of bona.
Was he in Europe? Is this a European?
Yeah, he was in Europe. I don't remember exactly where in Europe he was, but yeah, he was in Europe. And he says this is a big issue, that people think that they're allowed to make snowballs on Shabbos. And anyone walking around in the streets, he says, if you see the kids playing, making snowballs on Shabbos, you should stop them. They should not be playing. And this is a very early source, so there are contemporary poskim that said, we really don't think this should be a problem, but we can't allow this after the Chavos Yair held that it was a problem. So practically, making snowballs, and for sure making snowmen, which is definitely has more room to be machmir. When making snowmen, it has more kiyum. Sometimes people make snowmen last for days and weeks. That would for sure should be avoided on Shabbos, and I think that's the general practice. Is that Rabbanim will advise that snowball fights should be left for the snow days when you're off from school, but not on Shabbos. One other snow question, which I thought was very interesting, switching over to monetary matters, is an interesting case where you have all these snow plowers, snow shovelers that come looking for jobs, and question is raised. Someone came, let's take Rick as our example here. Rick was at home overnight, snowed a couple feet, and someone decided, I'll take on this job. So they didn't bother to ask you. They just figured you want it plowed, and they went and shoveled your driveway, shoveled your patio, shoveled all the areas you'd want to be shoveled, your sidewalk and everything. And they came to you tomorrow morning. You look, everything's good. They said, okay, that'll be whatever the rate was, $150. And Rick says, who are you? I didn't hire you. So the question would be, what happens in such a case? They make a claim. We did the job for you. We thought you would want it. Is there?
That Jewish guy wouldn't. Everybody on the block paid with the Jewish guy.
Well, yeah. So usually, right? General practice is that people are shoveling. They gotta get permission from the owner before they start doing that. It would be hard to say that that's a chilul Hashem. It's not a typical practice. Like you're just coming on and shoveling my practice without asking me. It would probably be more common in a case where there's like some distant relationship, before. But it's a fascinating question. Is would Rick be obligated to pay for the service that he got in such a situation? So there's two things that he could argue back, and it would make a difference which one we're talking about over here. So one thing he could say is that it's true. I wanted my everything the guy did a good job. Everything that was done was supposed to be done. It wasn't like he did. This was what he was planning on doing. He wanted his driveway cleaned. He wanted the walkway cleaned. This is the job. This job would have been done anyway. Someone would have been hired, but I wouldn't have hired you. I have my own guy that I was going to hire. Right? I have my own guy. I didn't hire you, so I'm not obligated to pay you. So the question is, this possibly falls into a sugya in the Gemara called the Yored L'so Sada Chavero. The Gemara in Bava Metzia, towards the end of Bava Metzia, talks about similar type of a case. A person sees this person's field, and back then they had, probably now also in more agricultural parts they have, fields that are clearly designated for specific things. So there was something called a field which is clearly designated for tree planting, or whatever the thing was for. And this person sees, this guy's field. Oh, he didn't get around to it. I'll just take on the job. So he just goes into the guy's field and plants the trees for him, and says, it comes to him whenever he finds the guy. He says, I did the job for you. Here's the invoice. And the guy says back to him, I didn't hire you. I didn't ask you for this. He says, what do you mean? Your field was needing some tree planting. That's what I was waiting for. So there's a big discussion in the Gemara about this. It comes up is discussed also in Shulchan Aruch, in Shin Ayin Hey. And basically what comes out is that the fact that you did not hire someone does not mean that you're not obligated to pay him. Because if you got a benefit from someone else, you're obligated to pay for the benefit that you got. Now, if you make the argument, I don't want that. I wasn't interested. You thought it's true that I have a tree field, but I didn't want my trees being planted this year. I wanted to give the land a rest for the year. I wanted to use it for whatever I wanted. I wanted my grandkids to play on it this year. Whatever other plans I had, I don't want the trees. Take the trees and take them home. That's you should have consulted with me. I didn't hire you. So that taina, that claim would certainly be a good claim, and the guy would not be entitled to any payment. He didn't want the job. But if the field owner says, he doesn't make that claim. He did want his field to be planted. He just didn't get around to it. He was going to hire someone else, whatever it would be. But he really wants to keep the saplings that were planted, so he's obligated to pay. Now, if the Gemara makes a distinction between what's
even
called
though it was Shabbos.
So this has nothing to do with Shabbos.
No, okay.
This has nothing to do with Shabbos.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if anything would change if it was on Shabbos, but this is just purely monetary question. So the Gemara makes a distinction if it's a field which is fit for saplings, which was waiting to be planted, to have trees planted in it, or it was really not for that, and how much the person will have to pay based on that. So the question would be, can we take this whole sugya, this whole topic of someone going into someone else's field and making some type of improvement themselves without consulting the owner? Can we kind of apply that to our case of shoveling? You can make the argument that a home which has a foot of snow in it, a driveway which has a foot of snow, etc., is waiting to be shoveled, meaning this is the practice of everyone. It's the equivalent of a field which is designated for tree planting. This is something that everyone's doing. Can you make an argument that this should be a similar thing? What does everyone think? It'd be the same, different?
So when I grew up in Chicago, we used to do that as young kids. We'd shovel people's walk without them asking, and then go up and the puppy dog looks perfect. Half the time they gave us money, but if we didn't give us the money, we didn't
Right.
break their window.
Right.
Put the snow back.
Right. So that's exactly this question. That's exactly this question.
Wait, so what's the comparable case with the field?
So really, if we would it's at least a comparison to say that you got a benefit, and therefore we would only have to decide whether it's considered a suyalita or not a suyalita. A suyalita is the equivalent of it's a field which is designated, which gets a higher payment, gets what we call the going rate, and if someone did it to a field which was not a suyalita, was not designated for planting trees, they would still get paid, but it would be a lower. It wouldn't be the going rate, but rather it would be the lower between either the expenditures, how much it cost to produce the trees, to plant the trees, or the value of what was done, whichever one is lower. He would not have to pay the full going rate if it's not considered a suyalita. So over here, I think there's a very strong argument to say it's a suyalita. It's something that it's designated. It's omid for that. It's waiting to be plowed. Basically, everyone does it. Something which basically everyone does and kind of needs to do in order to function. So if Rick's argument would be that I was planning on doing it, but I had my own guy, and you shouldn't have done that. So we would say back, yes, that's true. You shouldn't have done that. He probably should have asked you, but at the end of the day, you got a benefit, and you would seemingly pay the going rate. Now, if there's a flexibility within the going rate, so he says, I charge 150, and Rick says, well, my guy charges 130. So certainly Rick would not have to pay 150. He would pay 130 because he didn't accept the deal. He wasn't consulted about it, and therefore he would not have to. He would pay, or really whatever the lower end of the rate was, if it was something that had a range to it. The question would be, what if Rick would say no, and this is why I chose Rick. He'd say, no, you think I hire someone? I do the work myself. I don't pay anything for it. I go out there and I shovel. Would have been free. Then what? So then it's a little harder. It's a harder argument for the guy to make,
Sure.
right? So in this case, he would be putter. Rick would be putter from the 130. He would have to pay even less than that. He would only have to pay the amount that it saves him. They would have to do some type of evaluation. The amount that it saves him, that he didn't have to do the work, whatever the value is of not having to do the work, but no going rate or anything like that. It would be just the cheapest thing of now. If he made an even bigger argument than that, and he says it's worth nothing to me because that's my exercise and I like doing it. So if that would be a good argument, then possibly he would go scot-free. In this case, for example, even more practical example. Let's say the guy did it, and then the people said, "What do you mean? We're going out of town tomorrow. We're out for the rest of the winter. We weren't planning on plowing at all." Right? So it wasn't a benefit. So being that this case there was no deal that was made, the guy just did it on his own volition. If there's the payment is only required because of benefit. So if there is no benefit because they're not going to be around, and they weren't planning on doing plowing, then again, the worker would not be paid.
And
So that's
in the
basic
HOA
idea.
where they require each person to shovel their house, their own house, then that kind of gets out of this issue because it's clear that it's a benefit and it's clear that they have to do it.
That's a good point. You're saying, and then that would get rid of even in town, but they could still make the argument they would have done it themselves.
Right.
It would have to be a true argument, though.
Right.
it would have to be a true argument. Now, the argument over here to have the equivalent of take your trees and go would be a little bit hard to apply to the snow. Seemingly, the equivalent would be put all the snow back. Right, put all the snow back so I could hire my guy, and I'm not paying you because I didn't hire you. Technically, it would seem that he could theoretically do that. But if he's gonna hire,
what if he prepaid for his guy? Like he hires his guy for the whole season, and he already paid him.
right? So then
his mom is losing money.
So then he's losing money. Exactly. That's another good example where because there was no upmark, because there was no deal, he didn't get a benefit. Meaning, basically, the principle that comes out from this is the basic principle is that when someone hires themselves, takes the liberty to do a job without being asked, there is a possibility for a requirement to pay them. Based on in accordance, but that is only in accordance with the benefit. So if they would have done an equivalence, then you'll pay the regular going rate. If they would have done it themselves, just as schar tircha. If it really didn't benefit for them because they already either paid for someone or were going out of town or whatever it would be, then it would be off the hook.
Were you saying there's some societies where there actually is, if the field is fallow, that it's open, people are expected to plant trees? Because there would be an economic benefit for that, to get to more productive use of land, if that was your expectation. But do you think there are certain societies where that happens?
Where the people themselves would do it, or you mean?
If
where random people you're saying would come?
I'm a tree guy. I'm riding around. I go, there's an empty field. I know he wants it.
No, that wasn't what I was saying. It wasn't that it was typical for people to just go on to other people without consulting them and do their field. That's a strange case. The Gemara talks about it, but it's a strange case. What I was just saying is that they would have fields that were very clearly designated for particular purposes. So it wouldn't just look like, any typical field. Like, it would be clear this is a tree field, or this is this field, this is that field. It would be clear what the thing was that was going to be done on it. Okay, shkoyach.